Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I'm doing another live version of Ask the Nick because, why not, right? Seems like a fun idea, and the last one seemed to have gone over pretty well, so let's go on ahead and do that. I'm going to actually go ahead and start off with a really common question that I get from my viewers, and I'll jump into questions showing up on the screen, hey Dawson? Which is, Nick, how do you actually use your knives? A lot of people say things on the comment channel like, oh my god, why do you even carry a knife? And, well, in a lot of ways, that's a silly question. At some level, I carry a knife because I think it's fun, because I think it's interesting, because it's a nice tool and it's a good symbol to me. Knives, I've said over and over again, are symbols of separating truth from the falsehood, from, getting up under things. I mean, dissection is a part of science in some ways, not necessarily of beings, but of problems. And so, for me, there's the symbolic value, but more often than not, the way I'm using my knife is cutting open envelopes, opening boxes, cutting through foam, and things like that. I make a lot of custom Kaiser foam cases, things like that. I end up using it to cut up apples on a regular basis. So a knife that can't cut an apple is, well, it's going to be a problem for me. And all sorts of things like that. And yeah, so that's kind of where I use my knives primarily. And very often it's just to help other people out. At work, people kind of understand that I'm a guy who carries a knife, and so they can come ask me, hey Nick, I need your knife. And works out nicely. So there you go. So I'm seeing people in the room, 59, holy crap. Hi everybody. By the way, of course, if you ask a question and I don't respond to it, you feel free to keep asking later on. The questions only show up so often on the channel. I see a little screen over here on my screen. So there you go. Somebody just asked, do you still like the Bowie? I assume you mean the Spyderco Slysz Bowie, even having handled better knives. So that's a really good question there. Yes, the answer is pretty easily yes. The Spyderco Slysz Bowie is a knife I've talked about a bunch of times, but I like this knife very much because it's a really, really solid option. There's a lot of really good stuff here. It's a boring knife, almost certainly, but it's boring in the very best of ways. It's a great cutting tool, it looks very nice, it's well thought out, well designed, and so, yeah, there were other knives that I like a lot, and some of the really high-end pieces, like the Norseman here, put the Bowie to shame in a couple of respects, but at the same time, this is just such a damn solid knife. If somebody asks me, Nick, I want to spend a couple $100 and only have one knife for the rest of my life, this is a pretty good choice. So, yeah, that's a really good question, though. To me, it's most definitely still a gem, and it's still a knife that I'm not going to sell again. There you go. So, yeah, good question there. Next question from John Akshaw. Any question or any tips on getting a very stripped PM2 screw out of there? Where is my PM2? There it is. So, unfortunately, Spyderco is they're rather a fan of red Loctite, which can mean it's pretty easy lately, that is. They haven't always been, but they've been having some issues lately. But it can be very easy if you use any torque on their screws, which are also maybe a little bit softer than the mean. It can be easy to strip these little guys out, and that's frustrating. When that happens, there are a couple of approaches you can take. Honestly, the very first approach I would take would be to contact Spyderco and just say, hey guys, I got a stripped screw. What can you do for me here? You might have to send it back to them, and they may charge you some money for it because technically you have voided their warranty, which is not a great warranty if it voids that. But anyways, it is kind of at some level their problem, and they need to see that customers are being negatively impacted by their choice to use hardcore thread locker. So that's kind of the first approach I tend to advocate to people, is that you should absolutely try the manufacturer first before you start making other crazy steps to remove stripped screws. If for whatever reason that's not the case, that's not a possibility, try using some heat. It could well be that if you heat the screw up a little bit, either using the tip of a soldering iron or a hairdryer or something along those lines, it'll release the Loctite enough that whatever's left of the thread will let you back the screw out and swap in a new one. That's a pretty good one. It's a pretty good solution. There are more destructive solutions, like there exist bits that are dedicated to removing stripped screws. If you're fighting with Loctite, those are going to strip out too, because this just doesn't want to turn at a fundamental level. That's a separate bit of ugly, but that's another approach you can take. And then finally, and it gets really difficult on a knife with a very flush screw like this, but it's much more possible on a knife like, right here. This is a Hogue X5. If this strip's screwed out, you can actually use a little Dremel tool or even a hacksaw blade to kind of cut a horizontal gash through the middle of it and then turn it out using just a vanilla sort of flathead screwdriver. I don't know that I recommend that because it's killing the screw and you have a very, very strong chance of hurting the finish on the blade. But that is kind of a last-ditch effort. So, there you go. That's a great question, though. Let's see here. I'm looking through the questions. You had any experience with CRK's newer, harder S35 VN heat treat versus the older, softer one? Okay. Let me level with you here. Heat treat is a wonderful thing. Harder heat treat is, by and large, a good thing for an everyday carry knife. Absolutely. And this Chris Reeve that I bought recently, a Chris Reeve knives in Kosi, in Singo. The Ngosi's the other model. Not a brilliant man, but whatever. This guy does have the harder heat treat. Are you actually going to notice that on a regular basis? Is that something that you should really oh my God, my Sebenza's defective because it's got the older heat treat? No, probably not. It's a nice thing to have, and it'll definitely make it a little bit harder to sharpen, but you can do it less regularly. It's not a huge deal every day. And compared to some of the other steels out there in the world, S35 VN, heat treated even to the older standard, is going to perform a little bit better. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, but it is a nice thing that they're moving to a harder treat. I'll also say that their harder treat is still a little bit behind the curve for some modern knife makers. A lot of people are going even higher than I think they're doing 59 to 60 now. And so even with that, Chris Reeve S35 VN is still not necessarily the strongest performer out there. But again, does it really matter at the end of the day? Probably not, no. Steel is something that even I am guilty of this. I spend way more time thinking about steel than I need to, because practically speaking, with the amount I use my knives, I'm still sharpening once, a month or something like that, although given I carry a lot of knives. So there you go. That's a great question, though, and hopefully that's useful. Let's see here. Gavin Reddig asks, Nick, if you had $2,000 to buy one knife that you get to carry for the rest of your life to exclusivity, I guess, what would that be? If I could only carry one knife for the rest of my life, that's really, really tough. If it's just one knife, and I get variations on this question a lot, but that's okay. So if I only get the one knife, and that's my last knife, period, it would have to be something very, very durable that I could repair very nicely using, and the Sebenza comes to mind. Not that that's the perfect solution for me. This is way too big. But still, something that's running on phosphor bronze washers rather than bearings, something with relatively few parts, maybe a replaceable lock bar insert. But, and so, if it has to last my lifetime, that's a different question. If it's just what knife would I carry if I could only carry one knife, there were a couple of really good options. The Spyderco Slysz Bowie does come to mind because it's such a damn good all-around knife, and I like it so much. The Spyderco Delica is actually another pretty compelling option because, it's a great all-arounder. This is a small knife. It's relatively inexpensive. It would use, a very small portion of that huge budget you gave me. But nonetheless, there is zero reason that I couldn't go the rest of my life carrying only this knife. As much as I want to be a snob and as much as I love variety, that's up there. The Chris Reeve tie lock, which is currently on loan to my buddies Frankie and Bud at the Birdshot IV channel, is another really good option for me. Personally, I'm very, very, I don't know. I tend to go with a gentleman's sort of carry, and so and I'm not odd use at all. So the tie lock is a pretty good choice. But so that's kind of where I would land. You gave me a huge budget, though, but the thing is, I'm not going to use a $3,000 knife on a regular basis. I'm not going to carry it on a regular basis because usually $3,000 knives aren't actually going to be really functional cutting tools that I'd want to everyday carry. There were a lot of really great options out there, and I'm really glad at the end of the day I don't have to make that call. So, great question, though. Let's see here. What do you think of the knives with replaceable blades? So that's kind of a thing lately. Oh, who's the person? The Epic Snuggle Bunny, I think, just reviewed, or he got one of them recently. There's a company that's now making these in earnest, where it's like a blade that you bolt onto the handle. The thing is, at some level, sure, cool, why not? And there's a lot to be said for having an easily discardable cheap blade. So if you do a stupid cutting task, like you're cutting cardboard on concrete, you can just get rid of the blade. That's kind of where the Gerber Reabilité, your EAB Light, I suppose, and your other, the Utilizer, I think, Spectrum Energetics, that's where those come into play. As for a higher-end knife with a replaceable blade, look, at some level every blade is replaceable, particularly from manufacturers that sell parts, like Chris Reeve or, who else sells parts? I'm sure some of the other companies would sell you parts. At that point, you just use the knife until you need to get rid of it. The real purpose of a disposable blade is, like I said, when you want that blade to be very cheap for abuse, or when you really, really don't want to bother sharpening. Like there are disposable blade straight razors for shaving, and they are by and large pretty terrible relative to an actual straight razor that you strop and whatnot, but they're also very low maintenance, and in that case it makes a lot of sense if you're a barber working with multiple people, because there is zero chance of a bloodborne illness or something like that being put on the razor. And, you don't have to think about sterilization because you're just swapping it out there. So anyways, that's kind of where I land on the disposable blade thing. On the blades that kind of bolt onto the knife, the problem with that is that very often the blade needs to be relatively thick to accommodate the Allen keys that keep it in there, and the blade has to be fairly short because, well, you've got that spine on there already, and so you end up with a pry bar that you're putting on there. Even with a hollow grind, it's not so useful. So those blades, although they're pretty neat, and I applaud the innovation, just don't appeal to me in the grand scheme. So hopefully that was interesting. Let's see here. Mike Bates asks, are there any sneak previews on your Gareth Bull Miura? Any thoughts on that? Look, the Miura is unfortunately right now with Birdshot IV. Not unfortunate because, they're fine. They're going to take care of it, but unfortunate because I can't reference it. It's a great knife. It is a really, really nice little knife, and it's really, for me, scratched the itch of, I don't know, a slightly more, small, subtle, classy carry. It's a beautiful, beautiful knife. Absolutely 100%. Here, I'll put some more knives on the screen here for everybody, make it a little prettier. And so in that way, I love the knife very much. Yeah, it's got a couple of little faults, and when I do the review, there's going to be some good, some great, some bad, and some ugly. But, it's still a very nice knife, and I'm looking forward to doing that review once I get it back, and once I'm absolutely sure that the honeymoon is over. That's a big thing I'm always thinking about with my reviews. Great question there. Kershaw Link, good or bad idea? So this is a knife. Oh, come here, Kershaw Link. Kershaw Link. Beautiful. Kershaw Link is one of those knives I have in my personal collection that needs to get reviewed, just terribly needs to get reviewed, because it's a really nice knife. But I just haven't had the time to it, because I've got a bunch of other knives I got to review first. And so, but that said, this is a very nice little option for a budget EDC thing. Don't interpret this as a full review, but I like this knife a lot, and I think it's one of the most compelling things I've seen out of Kershaw in a long time. So, well done with the Kershaw Link there, Kershaw. I appreciate that. Let's see here. How do you store your knives? Putting them up for a couple of months. So, Brett, that's a good question. I have I put some pictures on the, I think the very first Ask the Nick I might have done. 0.5 or 0, whatever, where I show I've got a little drawer that I put all of my knives into with some Kaiser foam cutouts for them. The thing is, though, I don't tend to do long storage. If a knife isn't going to get carried for 3 or 4 months, why the heck am I owning it? I have a lot of knives, and I have too many knives, frankly. Between the knives I keep around for review, like, for instance, your PM2 or, what else? The Ontario Rats and whatnot, and the knives I actually buy because I like to carry them, which is a couple others on the table here. I already have too many knives, so if I can afford to put a knife up for 4 months, I might as well just send it along. I'm just not wealthy enough that I can have a million knife collection. So, but in terms of long-term storage, to answer your question more directly, there are a couple of things to think about. Oil the blade. Use some sort of a blade oil, especially if the blade is at all something corrosive prone, and make sure that you're sensitive to where you're putting it. Don't put it in a wet environment, things like that. But, by and large, as long as the blade is oiled, and, this is a case where you might use like a pasty sort of frog lube or something, I think you're going to be okay. There we go. Shop Bevel asks, I have like 300 knives, am I sick? No, you've just got a different set of priorities than a lot of people. Look, I have no beef with anybody who has a huge collection. In some ways, it would be very nice if I could have one of those huge, tool chests like you see in the Home Depot, where I could just keep knife after knife after knife. It'd be great to just, if I'm doing a review, like reach over, okay, I need to have a, Gareth Bull Miura handy. Reach into the drawer, grab it out there. That'd be a beautiful thing. But unfortunately, and I think fortunately for me, I've kind of decided that I want to keep things small. I want to curate my collection so it really is a best of, rather than something, that any knife is present for. It keeps the cost way down, which is a nice thing. But that said, if you can afford to have a really huge collection, you can afford to store a really huge collection, then good on you. There's a lot of joy to be found there. And everybody does this kind of hobby a little bit differently. So, pardon me. Those at 22, 711 asks, in your extended EDC video, you have a set of lockpicks. What is that set? So I actually got that off of, I think, maybe I did mass drop for that. It's by South Ord, like South the direction, ORD. And it's a nice little set. I forget the model number and name or whatever on it, but it works just fine. There were plenty of other sets. Remember, though, as I said in that video, that lockpicks are of different legality in different places in the U.S. and around the world. In many places, you need to be a certified locksmith on duty to carry lockpicks because they, but usually that's kind of a screw you charge. If they pull you over because you look sketchy and they find the lockpick, they'll throw that one at you too, just like knife length laws. No one's really measuring your knife unless you're already screwing up, or unless the cop doesn't like the look of you, which is kind of loaded in many situations. But anyways, so be careful with your lockpicks, but that's where I got that. Ryan Riggs asked, have you ever cut yourself bad with one of your knives? Bad. No, I haven't cut myself bad yet. I mean, knock on, do I even have wood? Knock on IKEA desk. Close enough, right? No, I've definitely cut myself. I mean, recently I actually cut myself. You can see right here on the finger there. I had I was sharpening up this D2 Rat 1, putting a nice mirror edge on it. And as it was in the clamp on the KME, I just put my hand, kind of moved my hand past. And it just caught the little tip there, and well, next thing you know, I'm bleeding. Luckily, sharp knives, actually, the cuts heal very quickly, which is nice. I've also had a couple of times where my, actually, this little bugger right here, the ZT452CF, very first day I cleaned it out, it fell shut a lot more quickly than I expected it to, and it got me right. I've got a video about that, but it did one of these things where it fell down onto my knuckle and cut me pretty good. And that's a crappy place to get a cut because every time you bend your thumb, you reopen the cut. But anyways, I've done that, but beyond that, I really haven't. And most of the time, entertainingly enough, I cut myself. It's not a knife at all. This guy was on a cardboard box. You can see right there. Actually, last night, I was bending, like I was reaching into bending over, reaching into a drawer, and the very tip of a cardboard box just... And it was, wasn't bad, but just a pain in the neck, and it's entertaining because it was a box full of knives. So there you go. Let's see here, what else? Hey, hi everybody. Wow, a lot of people are in here now. Beautiful. I did, in fact, switch to KME, what the asks. I got a video of it. I talk about my review. Look, the Edge Pro is a wonderful system. And, if somebody said, Nick, you can't use the KME anymore, yeah, sure, I can do that. I can live with that. But, for me, it offers some pretty compelling advantages I talked about in that review, and so I'm really liking it. It's a great system, but you can get great results on any system. The bigger question in a lot of ways with sharpening is skill. Remember, you can get those same really good results if you teach yourself to use bench stones or anything like that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the key to sharp knives is any one system. They've all got their advantages and their disadvantages. Keep that one in mind. Let's see here. How do you like the kind of Ripley surface pattern seen on the Norseman and other tie knives? So he's talking about this little guy right here. You can see on the Norseman here, there's machining marks left over, basically. When he does the plunge grind, he being John Grimsmo and Eric Grimsmo, they actually don't smooth this out. Unlike, for instance, on the Rask, which is by the same makers, you can see here they've completely smoothed that out. But on the Norseman, they leave it in there. That's a great question there. I think that's Cloud Cleaver, and I like it a lot, but... honestly, I think it's just aesthetic. I've never noticed any cutting advantages for it, although, again, this knife is weird in a bunch of other ways, so comparing this cutting to some other ones is a little apples and oranges-y. But, it works fine, and I really do like the aesthetic of it. I think that the Norseman is a much more interesting knife because of it, and in some ways I almost miss that on the Rask. I understand, and I like this polish very much, but, I kind of do wish that they'd stuck with that pattern. It would have been more interesting. Adam Green, has anyone noticed that literally everything is sold out on the Grimsmo website? Yeah. So the Grimsmo brothers, they are very, very good at making knives. They are not very, very good at making knives available. Right now, they are still, to the best of my knowledge, and given I don't talk to the guys particularly, I don't know a damn thing about it, but they are still working through the pre-orders they took for the Rask. And they're being pretty classy about that, in that they're filling pre-orders before they make other products. That's a really common trap that a lot of knife makers fall into, is they take a bunch of pre-orders, and then they make every other knife first, because it's very hard. I forget who said this, but some knife maker or another on a forum said something along the lines of the very hardest knife to make is the one that's already paid for, because that's not bringing new money into the shop. That's just something that's an obligation you have. And so I think they're deeply in knife debt, and they're making as many Rasks as they can right now to get through the pre-order list. Once they get through that, I suspect we're going to start seeing a lot more Rasks and Norsemen pop up on the website, because they're getting very good at cranking them out quickly, and that's a good way for them to effectively print money. They're also doing other products. They're doing the spin top now. Grimsmo showed off a picture of a fidget spinner, like one of these little guys here. This is a Rotoblade Stubby. I'm going to be doing a review of a bunch of these, by the way, coming up soon. But they're working on one of those, and he made a very cryptic comment last night on my Instagram, actually, about wanting to stop making flashlights. And that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. I would be very interested to see what that ends up looking like. So, yeah. Anyways, I respect them very much as knife makers, and, as businessmen, they're doing fine by their people by and large, but I would sure love to see more availability myself. Okay, let's see here. Cloud Cleaver 23. Yes, spinner reviews. Okay, I'll show you right now. I have on the table right now these. Oh, no, I got this guy as well. I've got a crap ton of spinners right now with me that are waiting to do kind of a mass review. This is the Troika, I believe. This is a no-name I found on a forum. I think this is Restless Hands. This here is the Torque Bar, which is kind of the what everybody talks about is the high-end spinner, etc. But anyways, there were a bunch of spinners out there that I'm looking into here. Should be fun. The Stubby does have a really long spin time there, Adam Green, as you said. This is a pretty impressive little spinner right here. Let's see here. Primary Motors asks, any opinion on Wee knives? Yeah, so this is a Wee knife right here. I've got this guy on loan from Frankie and Bud at the Birdshot IV. They do really nice knife making. They make very, very pretty knives, and they make very, very well-made knives. Great action detent, that sort of a thing. They also use stupid screws. Oh my God. And so, as a result, I look at Wee Knives' catalog, and it's like, that's really neat looking, but it's broken. And, I have very strong feelings on this, and so a lot of people it won't bother them. But for me, Wee Knives just isn't the thing. I look at their designs, and it's just like, I don't care, because you're doing something fundamentally dumb here. And so I'm going to review them on the channel, but I already know what the ugly is going to be, and there's just no way in heck I'm buying one of these until they actually put real fasteners on it. Until they start taking it seriously. I know some people love that, but for me, it's the screw thing just kills it for me. And so they're a neat curiosity, but, I'm not going to give them my money. So there you go. Adam Green saying function over form. Absolutely, completely. Let's see here. What is the best non-murdery looking knife comes from? Let's see, Kempo Kid. You see, that's really tough, because it depends on what you consider to be murdery, and also what you consider to be best. There are some knives that, some people like, okay, the Razel has a weird kind of relationship to that. It looks like a tool, but at some level it can be scary to people. The Grimsmo is... So it's more weird than it is like, oh my God, this is going to kill somebody. Sheep's foot blades tend to get tend to be better off in terms of the murdery feeling with them. Like the Benchmade Triage or something like that. Doesn't look terribly murdery. But, it depends on the people you're dealing with who are afraid. I can't really say what the best knife is anyways, let alone a best made sort of thing. XMR Cool says, did you hear Knife News say Benchmade's coming out with a mini Crooked River? Yeah, so this was just announced today. And that's kind of neat. The Crooked River is it's been a huge freaking Benchmade knife. It's got the diamond wood scales, and it's supposed to be a really nice knife, but it's just way too big for me. So I am going to probably try and pick one of those guys up if the price is reasonable. And, Benchmade is not very good at making prices reasonable, so we're going to see there. But I'm not a huge fan of some of their pricing decisions, and that may put that one out of the running for me before it even starts. So there you go. Let's see here. Watch out for that centering, Adam Green says. Yep. Oh, Benchmade, why you gotta be like that? Special reviewer asks, what about the Spyderco Chinese lineup, like the Spyderco Tenacious and otherwise? Let me see here. Oh, come here. I've got my little drawer of knives I haven't yet reviewed or that I need to do something with. This is a very, very badly sharpened Spyderco. I think this is the Ambitious. Either way, it's not the Tenacious. I think it's the slightly smaller model. I'm sure chat's going to be spamming it here shortly. But it's an example of this. The sharpening is not always as bad. A viewer sent this to me to just see if I could do anything with it. Because it wasn't doing him much good. But they are fine at some level. I'm not a huge fan of the... by the way, this is why any powered sharpening system can be kind of dangerous, especially the ones that move quickly. Things like the Tormek? Cedric Ada's been doing videos on that. He's in my... it's the Persistence. Thank you very much there, viewers. I appreciate that. Yele, I believe is your name. But anyways, they're fine knives in a lot of ways. I feel like they don't compare as well to your Japanese-made Spydercos. So, for instance, if I had the choice of this guy or the Delica, even if the blade was, not wrecked, I would probably go Delica. These tend to be a little bit heavier. They tend to be a little bit thicker. The steels are a little less compelling, although 8CR13, whatever, is... it's okay, I guess. But they're fine choices, and if it's something that you're interested in, check it out. But there were a lot of really fine choices in that lower-end sort of $40 to $60 category, and so they're fine. So there you go. Good question. John Akshar asks, why don't you like the Leak? He's talking about the Kershaw Link. I don't have one on the table, but it is a knife that I owned for a little while, and it had the Speed Safe. So Speed Safe is Kershaw's assist mechanism. For those of you following along at home, this is a Oh So Sweet, by the way, which is on loan from the Frankie and Bird collection. But it had the Speed Safe assist, and it had a very, very strong Speed Safe, which meant it was just not great for putting away one-handed. And a couple of different times that knife bit me as I tried to do it. I'm sure if the Leak was sold as a manual knife, I would be a much bigger fan of it. But because of the assist being as strong as it did, it also had a little safety on it, and it was just a knife that I bought and I just never liked particularly. I'd like to do a review of one so I can say something more cogent about it, now having handled more knives. But so far, that's why one has never come back across my... certainly, it's not something I would ever buy again. But there you go. Let's see here. What else is in there? If I could take any piece of gear into a simulation with no fit and finish issues, only design flaws, what would I try? That's kind of a weird question, Edenhofer. But so there were a lot of companies that have very, very good ideas, but very, very poor execution. Personally, and I may catch some flack for this, but the Hinderer XM18 is a great example of this. The XM18 is a great knife design that's just not implemented all that well. And I just had one on the table at 3.5 inch for review. And the review's going to go live one of these days, I'm not sure. But anyways, unfortunately, it had, like Teflon washes, it had a terrible detent. The whole thing was a little rickety, and I think that's a knife that if it was done in a way where everything was done perfectly, it would be incredibly compelling. And would be a great knife. And so I'd love to see it in that sort of a state. And frankly, a lot of what Benchmade does, if they could make their knives as well as the knives it designed, that would be a beautiful thing. But unfortunately, it really isn't here. I'll put a Hinderer Investigator on the screen I'm talking about in the room. But, yeah, so there you go. That's kind of where I would go. If I could completely negate fit and finish issues, I think Hinderer would be much more interesting. Benchmade would be more interesting. Even Boca, for that matter. Boca has some neat designs, but they don't tend to execute them so well. A Cricket, CRKT, they do great work. Well, I'm sorry, they do great designs very badly generally. And if they were doing great designs very well, I'd be a big fan. So there you go. Let's see here. Looking at buying another Kaiser, anyone in particular you can recommend, any Kaiser reviews upcoming? Do I have any Kaiser reviews upcoming? Yes, I have a review of the Kaiser John Gray SLT, which is a very neat little knife, and there's a bunch of good to it. It's a beautiful knife. You need to love the aesthetic of it, absolutely, but if you do, it's a great, great, great solid knife. Otherwise, take a look at my other Kaiser reviews. Very often when people ask the Nick these sorts of questions, I'm not saying you haven't done this, I'm just saying people will ask me, what's your favorite, what knives would you recommend from this brand? Well, a great way to do that is to look at my gems playlist, and the gems are the knives that I really highly recommend overall, and if you see something from that brand there, then chances are I recommend it. The Kaiser Lancer 2 there, Joseph D mentions, I think Dr. Frunky just got one of those, he's a YouTuber, and looks very nice. I'm hoping to get some other knives from Kaiser coming up here soon. The Feist, the little front flipper, I'm pretty excited about. But, yeah, there you go. So that's good. Let's see here. Can I open the Bowie? Absolutely 100%. Here we go. The Spyderco Slysz Bowie is now open. Congratulations. Let's see here. Buck Vantage Pro. S30V with a Bose. Let's see here. I believe... Is this... No, this isn't the Pro. This is just the regular... Buck Vantage. Look, I haven't checked that one out yet, so unfortunately, it's hard for me to make judgments aside from things on like price. That can be great, and a $49 knife with S30V could be a shining bargain if it's done well, or it could be a flaming wreck if they're just cutting every corner in order to get that price point down. So I can't really say without with any shadow of a doubt there. So there you go. Let's see here. Sabinza or Bowie have a smoother action. It really kind of depends on how you want to call it smooth. The Bowie is most definitely a quicker action. The Bowie can be kind of dropped shut in that way much more easily than the Sabinza. The Sabinza is a knife that makes you open it at its own pace. You can't really flick this guy open. You can if you really run it on light oil and whatnot, but as opposed to the Bowie, which absolutely you can pop right open. For me personally, I think I actually prefer the action on the Bowie. It's a little bit more conventional while still being super, super smooth. But the Sabinza action is kind of its own little affair. It's a beautiful thing in its own little way. But great question there. Let's see here. Let's see. Kolowek 94 asks a Grayson tie pen or a Brian tie knife. I have a review of the Tie-Tac 2 Tanto coming up soon, which is a great knife to say. Well, coming up soon, meaning I have filmed it. It may be months before it airs. Sorry about that. But anyways, that review has been filmed, and it's an interesting little knife. It seems more toy than knife to me, but then again, I'm kind of a snob, so there you go. There you go. Birdshot took a crap on the Slysz Bowie, Adam Green says. Yeah, they're not always right, but that's okay. They don't have to be. Let's see here. Tyler Beecher. That's a great question. Asks, have you ever come across anybody in person who tried to talk up their gas station special as a gem? So, yes, I have a story about this. Oh, it's story time with the Nick. One day, I'm sitting in my office at the work. And that day I happened to be carrying my Graham folding razor. This little guy right here. This is a great knife. It's a gem. It's like a, $375, I think was the original price. Really, really incredible knife here. Some guy comes into my office. I forget who he was. But anyways, he comes into my office. He says, hey, Nick, we have some little discussion. I notice he's got a pocket clip sticking out his pocket, so I figure he's a knife guy. And so I said, hey, so what you carrying there? It's nice to see somebody else around here carrying a knife. So few people understand that it's a great tool. And so out of his pocket, he extracts the crappiest Gerber ever. I don't even remember what it was. I don't even know that he knew what it was. It was just some little tiny crappy Gerber thing. And he handed it to me. He was like, I'm playing with it here. I'm feeling vertical, horizontal blade play. It's dull as a freaking butter knife, whatever. And he said, oh, so what are you carrying? So I pull this guy out. He kind of gives me the look. And given this is a weird knife, absolutely 100%, but I show it to him, show him how the flipper works, show him how to unlock and everything. He flips it back and forth a few times. He says, I think I like mine better. And I wanted to be very cordial and nice because it is a good idea to be kind to people who are new to the hobby. Not everybody's a snob, and not everybody, a lot of people are going to carry a snap-on first. And, you don't make friends by saying, you're carrying a piece of crap, shut you, trap. But anyway, so I think I just said, hey, I'm glad it's serving you well, and moved on. But, oh, did that ever sting to me. And he was, making the really strong up, but it's just like, oh, you don't know what you're doing to my heart here, buddy. And so, nonetheless, so that's my little story about the pain of people who, just don't acknowledge the quality and the excellent. Oh boy, that burns. Oh, did that burn? Rhymerox asks, have I ever a hard time explaining a purchase to somebody? My father was telling me I spent way too much on a Sage 5, didn't believe it was real carbon fiber or anything. Well, to be fair, I believe the Sage 5 is not fully carbon fiber. I don't have a Spyderco carbon fiber knife around here at the moment, but, ZT the Spyderco does make some knives that are fully carbon fiber, like this PM2 here in M4. But ZT, for instance, makes their knives out of completely carbon fiber. Spyderco, though, in the Sage 5, I believe it's the case with the Sage 5. Watch my review, I'll comment there. They put a little layer of carbon fiber on top of some G10, so he's kind of right. It's partly carbon fiber. But anyways, people who don't understand spending that kind of money on a knife is pretty commonplace. I don't tend to talk about that. Like, when that guy came into my office, I didn't say, it's a $375 knife, because, that's a jackass thing to do. But, very often people will ask questions like, why would you ever consider spending, $700 on a knife? And, that's a fair question. Why would we? And the answer is because we're freaking crazy. I mean, if you love knives at a very real level and you're really an enthusiast, you get that hedonic adaptation going where you're like, oh my God, well, yeah, sure, it's $700, but look at this, it drops shut. People aren't going to get that. Oh my God, look at the detent. People don't understand that because they don't give a damn. They just look at it as a knife as being something that cuts things, and that fundamentally this little snap-on affair is just as much a knife as this little guy is. And so, at some level, it's very frustrating as a collector that people just don't understand what the heck it is that we're doing with our lives. But at another level, they don't need to. My fiance, at some level, she's, I wouldn't call her a knife person. She carries a knife, but it's not anything that she's really in love with. She carries a ZT350. But, if she asks, how much for that knife, and it's just like, $700, she realizes I'm insane, and she spends money on purses and on clothing and things like that. So, it's not a big deal. But nonetheless, there are always going to be people who don't understand what you do with your money. At some level, it's none of their business. And at another level, maybe you can show them the quality. And sometimes that's the case. Usually, like with the Norseman, if you just show somebody how smooth the pivot is, they go, oh, that is really neat. And things like that. Show them how sharp the blade is. Especially if you've got like a nice mirror polish on a blade. A lot of people have never seen an edge that looks like this. And so it seems like quality to them. But, nonetheless, so you're not always going to convince people, and there are going to be people who feel like you shouldn't have spent your money on X, Y, or Z. It's like, okay, well, you shouldn't have spent your money on some other thing. I mean, if you want to play that game, you can play that game, but ultimately you're kind of just being a dick, at least in my personal opinion. Everybody's got tastes. So, there you go. Let's see here. Tristan Heath asks, what would you recommend for a sub-$100 smaller folder? Looking at the Dragonfly, the Manix 2, and the Native. Spyderco Native is a great knife. It's a solid gem. It's smaller than the Manix. I actually happen to have a G10 Manix on the table at the moment, which is here for review. Thank you very much to my buddy, whose name I'm forgetting. Anyways, you know who you are. Thank you. But this is a very nice knife. The Manix is great. The Native is also great. They're both gems there. The Dragonfly is also a gem entirely. But the real question is what you're looking for in terms of size. There are really three different size categories. Dragonfly is very small. The Manix is pretty large, especially in the pocket here. And the natives someplace in the middle there. I would also consider looking at the Delica and, what else is really good in that range? Kaiser's Vanguard line's got some pretty good stuff, although, if you're looking at Mannix, Native, etc. Personally, I don't know. If you're going to be cutting all day with it, then your Mannix is your choice. If you're going to be cutting a fair amount with it, the Native is a good choice because it's a little easier to carry. And if you're just carrying something and very rarely cutting, the Dragonfly or the Delica are probably better choices for you. So, there you go. That's the situation for the inexpensive knives. But also consider other knives, like the Rat number 1 here. Yeah, this is the one. Is a great knife in D2 steel, and that'll leave you some money left over there. What else are really good options? I mean, heck, at some level, depending on your needs, even like the Open L can work very nicely. It's a little more tactical than some of the ones I've shown off here. But, nonetheless, it's a very nice little knife here. So you don't even have to spend $100 to end up with a beautiful thing. And again, watch my cover diminishing returns video. I mean, this knife is $40. This knife is $700 roughly. And in terms of functionally cutting things, they're right around the same area. So there you go. Let's see here. Who was that in the background? So unfortunately, I got my window open, and there's a playground not so far away, unfortunately, and there were occasionally people screaming. It's unpleasant, but that's life. That's what people do. Yep, you'll also occasionally hear a duck, because there's a river out there as well. Ducks get very angry. Ducks are just jackasses, 100%. Anyways, there's some beautiful, beautiful comments blowing by here. Tristan Heath makes you think of having kids, doesn't it? No, it makes me very, very happy I'm not having kids, actually. The fiance and I have decided we're going to do our part to clean out the gene pool, and we're not going there. We both got our reasons individually, but that's not our scene. So, there you go. Hey, good to see you there, Mountain Man. Lots of good people in here, people who comment regularly. Thank you, everybody who come in and comment on a regular basis. It's nice to see friends here. Let's see here. Jake Sun and Shine says, spear the duck and roast it. No, that sounds kind of terrible. No, thank you. No shabazlets for you. Oh, man. I love the term shabazlet, but not quite enough to go there. Let's see here. Dizzy Jonah asks, is the booze staying? Talking about the booze arrow here. The Booz Arrow is a very, very nice knife, and in fact, it is a knife that was sent to me by the manufacturer as a loan, and that I ended up making the purchase on. So that should tell you something. The full review, though, goes live tomorrow. It's got it's got some ugly issues, and I think the factory let them down a little bit in a couple of places. But I still freaking love this design. It's so damn pretty. So there you go. Thank you, XMR Cool, for confirming that the Sage 5 is the carbon fiber laminate. Yella Deckers asks, hey, Nick, what's your opinion on the Alox Victorinox knives compared to the standard plastic versions? So, full disclaimer, I don't give a crap about Victorinox Swiss Army knives because they use nail nicks and I hate nail nicks. But that said, they're great tools, and that's personal bias 100%. The Alox versions, though, I do like a lot better than the plastic. They feel much more tool like this, smaller, they're more compact and dense. I would prefer, if I had to carry a Swiss Army knife every day, I'd want it to be Alox 1000%. But that's a really great question there, and so that's kind of where I'd land. Have you seen this VDK knives seem lackluster to me? Brett Luda asks. So actually, funny you should mention that. In my pocket today has been this little guy. This is a VDK of V knives. I don't even know what he goes by. There are many terms. But anyways, it's a Pioneer of the Nile by them. It's of the Nile, not of the Nile. I got family members who are pioneers of the Nile, but no, this one is the of like the River Nile, and it's kind of a nice knife. It's a there's a whole lot of good here. I obviously haven't filmed the full review yet. I haven't even written the full review yet, but so far I'm pretty impressed. It's a mid-tech sort of affair, but the action is very, very smooth on it. The detent is very, very nice. The ergonomics are quite good. I mean, overall, I like this knife a lot. It's definitely got some slight issues. It's very, very chubby, but that's okay. I kind of like it. Yeah, wait for the full review on this guy. That'll be a little while, but it's definitely on my mind. And VDK, I got no real issue with so far. A lot of the designs don't speak to me, I'll say that. And this is on loan from Frankie and the Bird, by the way. But, yeah, so anyways, keep that in mind. Let's see here. Lots of really good questions here. Let's see here. Brian Taylor asks, what sort of knife would you recommend for Donald Trump? So I'm not going to touch politics with a 10-freaking-foot pole, but what I am going to say is that for a sitting American president, what I would recommend overall is probably the Chris Reeve knives Mnandi, because I think it's all of the, let's face it, if you're the president, you're not going to need anything remotely related to self-defense because you got 15 Secret Service guys around you who are really, really good at defending themselves. Well, yourself, I suppose. And, you want something that's American-made, in all likelihood. You want something that's very classy. You want something that's very dressy in a lot of ways, because you're going to be... And so, for me, I would recommend the Chris Reeve knives Nandi. Absolutely 100%. That's where my mind went, and frankly, where it stayed. I think it's just a spectacular choice, because it's as much tool as the sitting U.S. president could ever need. And again, that's assuming that the Secret Service guys don't have knives, which I assume they all do, just because they're useful tools. And so, that's where I would go with that. I don't know, maybe there were other good choices, and perhaps, if you want to be a high-speed, low-drag tactical president, you might do something different, but the Mnandi seems like the best choice to me for a sitting American president. Great question. Let's see here. Cloud Cleave asks, would you break down and get it automatic if ZT partnered with the Hawk brothers to get their zero-blade play OTF knife system? So, that's tough. So the Hawk brothers, what he's talking about is their deadlock system. The Hawk brothers are the guys who did the Buck Marksman, the Chris Reeve tie lock, a bunch of other stuff. The Mud, I believe, was them. They've done crazy stuff every time they do something. The Hawks, I don't know, and maybe their father and son, I forget. But whatever it is, it's a... They've recently released an OTF knife that doesn't have the blade play that out the front automatics usually do. Automatics are actually illegal where I'm at, and so I probably wouldn't end up getting one. They may be legal to own, but not to carry. But at the same time, I would love to check one out. I'd love to review one of those guys. So, yeah, I don't know. But that's a great question. Well asked. Let's see here. What else is up here? Do you prefer the Wharncliffe Delica or the original for everyday carry? So, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm an idiot who ordered a fully serrated Wharncliffe Delica instead of a full regular Wharncliffe Delica. That's not a brilliant thing, because unfortunately it means I'm kind of comparing apples to oranges. I like the Wharncliffe blade a lot. Unfortunately, though, the Wharncliffe blade, as you can see here, and I'm going to do a full review on this guy, but the Wharncliffe blade is actually a lot thicker. Overall, like, you can see that there's a lot more of a nose on the Wharncliffe blade rather than the straight edge here. And that's makes this a little bit tougher to carry in the pocket. It's not a huge deal, but it definitely does add something to it. And so that makes the Wharncliffe a little less desirable in the pocket, and thus makes the Delica a little bit less interesting to me. And so even in the straight edge version, because I end up carrying a knife more often than I'm using the knife, I would probably go with the regular Delica instead of others. Let's see here. Apostle P's Medford review. So, the Apostle P is another YouTube reviewer, and he, last night, I think, made he had a little bit of fun with the YouTube, which is a beautiful thing, because the knife community takes itself way too damn seriously, myself included. It's very easy to get snobby, it's very easy to get combative, it's very easy to just, I don't know, be a pain about it. And, he had a little bit of fun with it. And I encourage you to go watch his video. That was pretty entertaining. He gave me some credit for the idea, because I have on occasion had my channel hijacked by random jackasses, usually Russian, but occasionally British. Anyways, I thought that was a beautiful thing, and that I hope he does more crazy stuff like that, because the world needs more laughter. There are way too many people taking way too many things way too seriously in the world. And there are things that need to be taken seriously. I agree with this 100%. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trivializing anybody's experience or issues. But at the same time, a little bit of joy is just a beautiful thing. So, I encourage you to check out that little bit of joy. It's nice to see the Apostle having some fun with things. Let's see here. What other good questions are there? What kind of Damascus is your favorite? Floris Sycamon? I'm not quite sure how your name's pronounced there, Floris, but either way, a Floris, not sure. What kind of Damascus do I like best? I haven't handled a whole lot of it. I've handled the Damascus that Chris Reeve uses, which I wasn't a huge fan of because it was very deeply etched. The blade always felt really scratchy and kind of, ribbed, for lack of a better term, on the Raindrop Damascus on the Nandi. And so I didn't really love that. Spyderco's Damascus on the Damascus Delica that I have reviewed but hasn't yet gone live, but that'll be soon. That one will actually be soonish. Is another Damascus that I wasn't in love with. It feels very gray, matte sort of an affair. What I probably like best that I've handled is Damascus. The actual, this is a company, because they make a Damascus that can be very nicely high polished and then etched. Maybe you can do that with other companies, and it's just the etch that I'm not loving on some other folks. But I had the Cody Utzler Custom, which was in Damascus, and I loved the steel on that and the finish on the blade, 100%. The knife itself was... I'm not going there, but the blade, I love that steel on there. So I like Damascus very much, and I'd love to see it applied in more places as an option. I've kind of come to the conclusion, though, that personally, Damascus and Damascus blades aren't super compelling to me. I don't know. I think I like the functionality and just the cleanliness of a relatively boring blade more so. So, there we go. Let's see here. Thor Patton Damascus for the win. Hey, Luke Albert, good to see you. Rather the Dog asks, Nick, why don't you try and pimp your knives, the production ones? That's a good question. I will occasionally do this, but I've kind of come to the conclusion that if you pimp your knives, you very often end up, if you don't love the knife enough to keep it unmodified, you're probably not going to love the knife enough to keep it after you modify it. I think that there are exceptions to this. Knives that are very, very good with one major exception. The Boost Blades Aero, I'm kind of previewing a little bit here, but the blade finish on this guy drives me nuts in a couple of ways. It's made the action less smooth, and it's just... the rest of the knife is so clean, and this blade finish is very kind of dirty. It's a blasted stonewash thing. And so I'm very strongly considering having this guy polished or satined at the very least, or maybe trying to do it myself to get rid of that issue. And I think the knife will be way more compelling for it in my personal life and collection. But, I don't know. It's a really good question. I've got a video coming up here soon. God, I say that all the time. Sorry, guys, but I got to build them up. About wanting to vet your people who do your modding, because be very careful about that. I've seen some knives come across my table that were modded terribly, and that's a big problem. So, great question there. Let's see. Every time I come into a live chat, Cody Utzler comes up. Jason L. says, I'm not going to go there. I've had some people, and I think you're actually the guy I'm thinking about, who have had some very good experiences with Cody and some very nice... he appears to be getting better and making some changes. But I've also had some other people who've taken bats on the Utzler world, so I don't know. I really hope he does better in the future. Oh, yeah, okay, it's you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that once you get off the honeymoon with it. And be interesting. How's the Rask action compared to the Shirogorov Neon? So the Grimsmo Rask is this little guy right here, and to me, the action on the Rask is way better. And actually, one thing that's very pleasant that I didn't anticipate is that this guy is smoothing out substantially. When I first got it, it didn't free drop even this easy. Whereas, the Neon is also a free dropper, but it just doesn't have that same lack of resistance. The deploy feels a little bit stronger on the detent feels a little stronger on the Neon, as I recall. Unfortunately, these guys didn't quite overlap. But nonetheless, the action on the Rask is a little bit better. But at this level, does it really matter? Probably not. The action is great. The action on the Neon was great. The action on the Norseman is great. The action on the Graham is absolutely great. Past the point, it's just you being a snob. And I'm good at being a snob, but still. What do you have on your keychain other than keys? I have very, very little on my keychain. All I have on my keychain is a car key at one end and a little, key smart organizer on the other end that lets me keep all my keys together. That's it. I don't tend to do keychain tools. I don't do all of that stuff. It's very lightweight. In the key department, I am high speed, low drag. On the wallets too, I keep a very small wallet that here we go. Just holds a couple of cards. I mean, it holds like 8 cards, which is very nice. So, that's all I need. Yeah, and feel free to click the thumbs up for the stream if you'd like, but you're also welcome not to. Somebody just said that in the stream here. Let's see here. How was the RAS compared to a Thorburn? So Thorburn Customs, I've only handled one of them, but that said, they have a much more, it's kind of an intermediate between the Sebenza hydraulic feeling and the Norseman complete free drop feeling. The Thorburns also drop very, very nicely, but there's a little bit more resistance. It's the difference between the IKBS sort of free drop and the caged bearings sort. This feels just like there's nothing there, and the IKBS just feels like whatever's there doesn't matter. It's got a very different feeling to it, but it's hard to capture in words. It's very, very tough. Let's see here. What else? You ever seen a ceramic folder? I believe, there are people who've made ceramic knives for everyday carry. Schrade, I think, makes a fixed blade that's ceramic. And, they're fine. Ceramic knives have unique advantages and disadvantages. Personally, I don't see the need. Yeah, they stay sharper longer, but you can't really resharpen them as effectively. Or at least it's a whole different process. And so for me, I go steel every day of the week. But hey, if somebody wants to try it, good on it. Innovation is a beautiful thing. Let's see here. Use them to cut veggies. Yeah, they're great in the kitchen. Absolutely 100%. Let's see here. Do you EDC a multi-tool along with your knife? Yes, watch my extended EDC and you'll see everything that I carry multi-tool-wise. I usually carry a Leatherman Charge TTI or a Leatherman Wave. It's the one I've got closest to me here. Great knives. Multi-tools, that is. They also have decent enough knives. Terrible steel, though. I'll rant about that one of these days. Just put a new edge on it. Not a great edge, but it does the trick. So there you go. And actually, guys, it's 56 minutes and 47 seconds now that I've been doing this. Holy crap. And so I think I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this off because, well, my larynx is going to come flying out and land on my knives, and that's going to be ugly. So I think I'm going to go on ahead and log off for the evening. I hope you guys found this interesting. Feel free to comment on give answers here. And if somebody wants to be an absolute gem, if you could kind of go through, this is a big question, but if somebody wants to go through and mark down what questions were answered when, you would get a shout out. I would love you forever because that makes it a lot easier to index these sorts of things for new people who are coming in to see this. Because an hour long is a whole lot of time. So anyways, thank you very much, and hope that you find this interesting, and mostly, though, just have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your afternoon. Bye, everybody.